Jonathan Swift is my fifth cousin, 9 times removed. Jonathan Swift was born on November 30th, 1667 in Dublin in the Kingdom of Ireland. He was the second child and only son of Jonathan Swift, 1640 to 1667, and his wife Abigail Eric of Frisby on the Reek. His father was a native of Goodrich, Herefordshire, but he accompanied his brothers to Ireland to seek their fortunes in law after their royalist father's estate was brought to ruin during the English Civil War. His maternal grandfather, James Eric, was the vicar of Thornton in Leicestershire in 1634. The vicar was convicted of Puritan practices. Sometime thereafter, Eric and his family, including his young daughter Abigail, fled to Ireland. Swift's father joined his elder brother, Godwin, in the practice of law in Ireland. He died in Dublin about 7 months before his namesake was born. He died of syphilis, which he said he got from dirty sheets when out of town. His mother returned to England after his birth, leaving him in the care of his uncle Goodwin Swift, 1628-1695, a close friend and confidant of Sir John Temple, whose son later employed Swift as his secretary. At the age of 1, Jonathan was taken by his wet nurse to her hometown of Whitehaven, Cumberland, England. He said that there he learned to read the Bible. His nurse returned him to his mother, still in Ireland, when he was 3. Swift's family had several interesting literary connections. His grandmother, Elizabeth Drayden Swift, was the niece of Sir Ernest Drayden, grandfather of poet John Drayden. The same grandmother's aunt, Catherine Drayden, was a first cousin of Elizabeth, wife of Sir Walter Raleigh. His great-great-grandmother, Margaret Swift, was the sister of Francis Godwin, author of The Man in the Moon, which influenced parts of Swift's Gulliver's Travels. His uncle Thomas Swift married a daughter of poet and playwright Sir William Davenport, a godson of William Shakespeare. Swift's benefactor and Uncle Goodwin Swift took primary responsibility for the young man, sending him with one of his cousins to Kilkenny College, also attended by philosopher George Berkeley. He arrived there at the age of 6, where he was expected to have already learned the basics in Latin. He had not, and thus begun his schooling in lower form. Swift graduated in 1682 when he was 15. He attended Trinity College, Dublin in 1682, financed by Godwin's son Willoughby. The 4-year course followed a curriculum largely set in the Middle Ages for the priesthood. The lectures were dominated by Aristotelian logic and philosophy. The basic skill taught to students was debate, and they were expected to be able to argue both sides of any argument or topic. Swift was above average student, but not exceptional, and received his B.A. in 1686 by special grace. Swift was studying for his master's degree when political troubles in Ireland surrounding the Glorious Revolution forced him to leave for England in 1688, where his mother helped him to get a position as secretary and personal assistant of Sir William Temple at Moor Park, Farnham. Temple was an English diplomat who had arranged the Triple Alliance of 1668. He had retired from public service to his country estate to tend his gardens and write his memoirs. Gaining his employer's confidence, Swift, often trusted with matters of great importance, within 3 years of their acquaintance, Temple introduced his secretary to King William III and sent him to London to urge the king to consent to a bill of triennial parliament. Swift took up his residence at Moor Park where he met Esther Johnson, then 8 years old, the daughter of an impoverished widow who acted as companion to Temple's sister, Lady Gifford. Swift was her tutor and mentor, and the two maintained a close but ambiguous relationship for the rest of Esther's life. In 1690, Swift left Temple for Ireland because of his health, but returned to Moor Park the following year. The illness consisted of fits and vertigo, or giddiness, now believed to be Meniere's disease, and it continued to plague him throughout his life. During this second stay with Temple, Swift received his M.A. from Hart Hall, Oxford, in 1692. He then left Moor Park, apparently despairing of gaining a better position through Temple's patronage, in order to become an ordained priest in the established Church of Ireland. He was appointed to the prebend of Kilroot in the Diocese of Connor in 1694. With his parish located at Kilroot near Carrickfergus in County Antrim. Swift appears to have been miserable in his new position, being isolated in a small remote community far from power and influence. While at Kilroot, however, he may well have become romantically involved with Jane Waring, whom he called Verena, the sister of an old college friend. A letter from him survives, offering to remain if she would marry him, and promised to leave and never return to Ireland if she refused. She presumably refused because Swift left his post and returned to England and Temple's service at Moor Park in 1696, and he remained there until Temple's death. There he was employed in helping to prepare Temple's memoirs and correspondence for publication. During this time, Swift wrote The Battle of the Books, a satire responding to critics of Temple's essay upon ancient and modern learning in 1690, though Battle was not published until 1704. Temple died on January 27th, 1699. Swift, normally a harsh judge of human nature, said that all that was good and amiable in mankind had died with Temple. He stayed on briefly in England to complete editing Temple's memoirs, and perhaps in the hopes that recognition of his work might earn him a suitable position in England. His work made enemies among some of Temple's family and friends, in particular Temple's formidable sister Martha, Lady Gifford, who objected to indiscretions included in the memoirs. Moreover, she noted that Swift had borrowed from her own biography, an accusation that Swift denied. Swift's next move was to approach King William directly, based on his imagined connection through Temple and a belief that he had been promised a position. This failed so miserably that he accepted the lesser post of secretary and chaplain to the Earl of Berkeley, one of the Lord Justice of Ireland. However, when he reached Ireland, he found that the secretaryship had already been given to another. He soon obtained the living of Larachor Agher at Rothbegen and the prebend of Dunlavin in St. Patrick's Cathedral, Dublin. Swift ministered to a congregation of about 15 at Larachor, which was just over 4.5 miles from Summerhill, County Meath, and 20 miles from Dublin. He had abundant leisure for cultivating his garden, making a canal after the Dutch fashion of Moor Park, planting willows, and rebuilding the vicarage. As chaplain to Lord Berkeley, he spent much of his time in Dublin and traveled to London frequently over the next 10 years. In 1701, he anonymously published the political pamphlet, a discourse on the contests and dissensions in Athens and Rome. Swift resided in Trim, County Meath, after 1700. He wrote many of his works during this period. In February 1702, Swift received his Doctor of Divinity degree from Trinity College, Dublin. That spring he traveled to England and then returned to Ireland in October, accompanied by Esther Johnson, now 20, and friend Rebecca Dingley, another member of William Temple's household. There is a great mystery and controversy over Swift's relationship with Esther Johnson, nicknamed Stella. Many, notably his close friend Thomas Sheridan, believe that they were secretly married in 1716. Others, like Swift's housekeeper, Mrs. Bent, and Rebecca Dingley, who lived with Stella all through her years in Ireland, dismissed the story as absurd. During his visits to England in these years, Swift published A Tale of a Tub and The Battle of the Book in 1704, and began to gain a reputation as a writer. This led to close, lifelong friendships with Alexander Pope, John Gay, and John Arbuthnot, forming the core of the Martinus Scriblerus Club, founded in 1713. Swift became increasingly active politically in these years, and early in his life belonged to the Whigs. As a member of the Anglican Church, he feared a return of the Catholic monarchy and papist absolutism. From 1707 to 1709 and again in 1710, Swift was in London unsuccessfully urging upon the Whig administration of Lord Godolphin the claims of the Irish clergy to the first fruits and 20s, Queen Anne's bounty, which brought in about 2,500 a year, already granted to their brethren in England. He found the opposition Tory leadership more sympathetic to his cause, and when they came to power in 1710, he was recruited to support their cause as editor of the Examiner. In 1711, Swift published the political pamphlet, The Conduct of the Allies, attacking the Whig government for its inability to end the prolonged war with France. Jonathan Swift was an Anglo-Irish satirist, author, essayist, political pamphleteer, poet, and Anglican cleric who became Dean of St. Patrick's Cathedral, Dublin. Swift is remembered for works such as A Tale of a Tub in 1704, An Argument Against Abolishing Christianity in 1712, Gulliver's Travels in 1726, and A Modest Proposal in 1729. He is regarded by the Encyclopedia Britannica as the foremost prose satirist in the English language. He originally published all of his works under pseudonyms such as Liminal Gulliver, Isaac Bickerstaff, M.B. Draper, or anonymously. He was a master of two styles of satire, the Horatian and Juvenalian styles. His deadpan ironic writing style, particularly in A Modest Proposal, has led to such satire being subsequently termed Swiftian. Before the fall of the Tory government, Swift hoped that his services would be rewarded with a church appointment in England. However, Queen Anne appeared to have taken a dislike to Swift and thwarted these efforts. Her dislike has been attributed to A Tale of a Tub, which she thought blasphemous, compounded by the Windsor prophecy, where Swift, with a surprising lack of tact, advised the Queen which of her bedchamber ladies she should and should not trust. The best position his friends could secure for him was the deanery of St. Patrick's. This was not in the Queen's gift, and Anne, who could be a bitter enemy, made it clear that Swift would not have received the preferment if she could have prevented it. With the return of the Whigs, Swift's best move was to leave England and return to Ireland in disappointment, a virtual exile to live like a rat in a hole. Once in Ireland, however, Swift began to turn his pamphleteering skills in support of Irish causes, producing some of his most memorable work: Proposal of Universal Use of Irish Manufacture, 1720, Draper's Letters, 1724, A Modest Proposal in 1729, earning him the status of an Irish patriot. This new role was unwelcome to the government, which made clumsy attempts to silence him. His printer, Edward Waters, was convicted of libel in 1720, but 4 years later a grand jury refused to find that the Draper letters were seditious. Swift responded with an attack on the Irish judiciary, and his principal target being the William Whiteshed, Lord Chief Justice of Ireland. Swift returned to England one more time in 1727 and stayed once again with Alexander Pope. The visit was cut short when Swift received word that Esther Johnson was dying and rushed back home to be with her. On January 28, 1728, Johnson died. Swift had prayed at her bedside, even composing prayers for her comfort. Swift could not bear to be present at the end, but on the night of her death he began to write his The Death of Mrs. Johnson. In 1738, Swift began to show signs of illness, and in 1742 he may have suffered a stroke, losing the ability to speak and realizing his worst fears of becoming mentally disabled. He became increasingly quarrelsome, and long-standing friendships like that with Thomas Sheridan ended without sufficient cause. To protect him from unscrupulous hangers-on who had begun to prey on the great man, his closest companions had him declared of unsound mind and memory. However, it was long believed by many that Swift was actually insane at this point. Definite symptoms of madness appeared in 1738. In 1741, guardians were appointed to take care of his affairs. In 1742, he suffered great pain from the inflammation of his left eye, which swelled to the size of an egg. 5 attendants had to restrain him from tearing out his eye. He went a whole year without uttering a word. On October 19, 1745, Swift, at nearly 78, died, after being laid out in public view for the people of Dublin to pay their last respects. He was buried on his own cathedral by Esther Johnson's side, in accordance with his wishes. Jonathan Swift wrote his own epitaph. Here is laid the body of Jonathan Swift, Doctor of Sacred Theology, Dean of the Cathedral Church, where fierce indignation can no longer injure the heart. Go forth, voyager, and copy, if you can, this vigorous, to the best of his ability, champion of liberty. W.B. Yeats politically translated it from the Latin as: Swift has sailed into his rest. Savage indignation there cannot lacerate his breast. Imitate him if you dare. World-besotted traveler, he served human liberty.